Hello and welcome to another edition of Hockey at the Hall. This is your host, Anthony DiPaolo.
I'm Sean Clancy.
And Sean, today we have a very special guest here in the studios of WSOU, and that is Mr. Matt Laughlin. So, Mr. Laughlin, how are you today?
Anthony, I'm doing great. Sean, good to see you both, and thanks for having me on. And however long we'll go with this, it'll be a lot easier if you call me Matt.
All right, sounds good, Matt. Hey, thanks for coming on. We're, like I said earlier, you're the first guest that we've ever had, and it really means a lot to us. You're the Devil's broadcaster and coming down to do our little old podcast. It barely has 100 followers on Facebook, but, maybe this will help boost that.
That would be nice. No, it is my pleasure. First off, for a lot of reasons, I love to talk hockey. It was nice of you to ask for me to come here, and also my history here at Seton Hall and WSOU, so it's always good to come back.
So Matt, you want to tell us really quick how it all started with WSOU? I believe it was right at the end of your freshman year.
Yeah, I came here with no thought at all of doing anything in communications. Loved radio, loved television, but didn't think that there was anything in my future. Really came here to be an accountant. Started out pursuing that degree, but I did always love radio. As I said, I did always love television, always loved sports, and obviously WSOU has a big voice in the metropolitan area. It was the only voice for Seton Hall sports at the time. I know that has changed. But at any rate, I did decide that during the course of my freshman year, when it was all said and done and got that 1 year under my belt, that I would come over here and see if I could give it a go. And I was fortunate enough to run into two important people when I knocked on the door. Kevin Hislop at the time was the faculty advisor, and he was in his office along with Stu Miller, who was the incoming sports director. He was going to run things on the sports side that next year, and both of them welcomed me with open arms. Now, whether or not it had been a different reaction or neither one was there or whatever, who knows? Life is strange that way. Small little changes can really dramatically affect the outcome. But at any rate, they were both there. They both said, hey, you're welcome. You're a student. We're here for you. You will get out of it what you put into it. If you spend a lot of time, it'll probably work out pretty well, and knock on wood, it's worked out pretty well.
That's really interesting because my freshman year, I too was in the business school, and after my freshman year, I didn't really like it. I decided to change over to broadcasting, so I'm only in my first semester of broadcasting now, but it's going pretty good so far.
Yeah, well, I decided to stay with the business degree, though. I wasn't sure, where it would go, and I thought I needed something to fall back on. I think that was probably more my parents' influence, wanting me to have something to fall back on, this communication thing. You don't make a lot of money in the beginning, and
right.
Why are we spending all this money on a degree? But at any rate, I also didn't want to spend more than 4 years here. So I thought, you know what, let's see where this leads on the radio side. But I did change from accounting to marketing. It was a little bit of an easier major, and I didn't find accounting particularly to my liking. And so I was able to, I guess, have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I was in sports management, and I think I eventually was going to have to take an accounting class, but also there was economics. I couldn't get through the economics. It just didn't work out for me. So now I'm here. You're here.
And
talking a little hockey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And then after Seton Hall, fast forward a couple years, you started working with, I believe, Fox Sports.
Well, yeah, it took a while to get there. Another Seton Hall connection is Bob Lee, of course, the great ESPN anchor. And he is a Seton Hall grad. He had worked at WSOU. He had graduated. He's a few years older than I am, but he had graduated and was back at Walsh to cover a high school basketball game. He was working for a company called Suburban Cablevision, which was based out of East Orange. And he was the sports director. And he stopped by because they were preparing to do this game here, and he walked through the halls of WSOU, and I guess he had heard some of the work I had done or just was curious to see what had changed since he had been there. At any rate, I happened to be there. He introduced himself to me and said, listen, can you, if you're interested, why don't you come down the road a bit? And we got this little television station. We cover local events, and I'd love to show you the ropes. No money. Since you're not a communications major, there won't be any credit, but I can give you some experience. So I took him up on that offer, and ultimately, after graduation, I worked 1 year for a radio station in New Brunswick, WCTC, but always had stayed in contact with the folks at Suburban Cablevision. And Bob left to go to ESPN. And a short time thereafter, they had an opening for second assistant sports director. Bruce Beck, who's now at NBC and has done a great job for all these many years, was the sports director, replaced Bob. I had gotten to know him a little bit when I was doing some of that volunteer work over in East Orange. So at any rate, they had a need for another sports director. They asked if I'd be interested. I really wasn't thinking much about television. I really loved radio, but the money was better. I went from $7,900 at WCTC per year to $9,200 at TV3 per year, and that raise was far too much for me to turn down. And also, it was an opportunity to do sports. I was doing primarily news on the radio side. So at any rate, I worked at TV3 for many years, and then started to send out resumes and make some contacts. And again, fortunately, somebody liked my work, and I started to do some piecemeal work, on a freelance basis at what was then Sports Channel. It was owned by Cablevision. Cablevision then went into partnership with Fox, and they changed the Sports Channel name to Fox Sports New York, and then they bought Madison Square Garden, and they combined forces with the MSG network, and ultimately that channel became MSG 2, or MSG Plus, I guess it is now. At any rate, so it's all the same family, and I was able to just work my way on through television and found myself working for regional networks, and then ultimately I transitioned back to radio, my first love.
And you range from doing play-by-play. I believe you subbed in for Doc Emmerich whenever he did a national assignment. Then you did intermission reports with Stan Fischler, known as Matt and the Maven, which going back to middle school when I really started becoming a diehard hockey fan, I loved, especially Chuck the Duck.
Well, thanks, Anthony. It was a blast, to be honest with you. That was my primary responsibility, the pregame host, the intermission work, and the postgame. And working with Stan was such great fun. First off, when I began doing some hockey, it's not that it was unfamiliar to me, but I was coming from a basketball background primarily. I was doing a lot of basketball, and actually that was my first job with Sports Channel, was covering the Nets. But I would fill in on hockey, and both you and Sean may find as you go through your careers, you will certainly have mentors and you will certainly have people who support you, but there are people who will view you as a threat. They do exist there. They think you're about to take their job, or they're concerned that this person is going to replace them. And that's understandable because it does happen. But the point of the matter is, Stan could have looked at me as a threat, but instead what he did is he looked at me as a young kid who was willing to learn, and he was such a great teacher. So he would help me through the ropes, make sure you interview this guy at intermission because he's got a good story to tell. In fact, here is the story. You bring it out of him, etc. And then when we got a chance to work together, it was just kind of magic. He would take one side, I would take the other. Oftentimes it was natural. Sometimes we would just pick and choose because it worked to have a pro and a con. And the funny thing is we would get heated in our exchanges, but we never lost our friendship, and he remains a friend to this day. And that kind of fooled some people because, we would leave the rink and people would look at us and realize that they had seen us on the air a week ago, and we were kind of yelling at each other and kind of not really calling each other names, but it was clear that we disagreed with each other's position. But really, we remained very good friends. We left it in the studio, and it was a great segment. And the Chuck the Duck you refer to is a play on an old show. Groucho Marx used to host it, and for those who are listening who are really young, ask your grandparents or Wikipedia, search it, and you'll find out what it's about. But at any rate, there was a word of the day on that show, and if a contestant said the word of the day, this duck came down. Oh, you said the magic word. So we kind of incorporated that, and we would ask our viewers to send us questions, and if the one question was better than the other, and the producer thought, hey, that's the question of the day, down would come this stupid duck. And we thought it was kind of cheesy at first and kind of a tribute to an old-time television show back in the really early stages of television. And in the end, it became very popular. And in fact, toward the end of Chuck the Duck's life, the reason Chuck didn't survive for more than a couple of years is that Madison Square Garden had and still continues to have a big fundraising effort for its charity works. And we thought, well, let's see what Chuck would get. And we were stunned. Somebody, I think it was $5,000. Somebody bid on a stuffed duck. It's really just a stuffed animal. $5,000. It was incredible. So we thought for that kind of money, we would certainly give up the ghost.
It's a legendary duck, though. I was actually wondering what had happened to him because I hadn't seen him in a while. I definitely miss him.
Yeah.
And all the great intermission segments. Whatever happened to Chico Eats? I guess he finished everything in the arena?
Well, that's basically it. I mean, everything runs its course in this business. Yeah, I mean, there are certain basics and certain people and certain items that will stay, but you got to try to stay fresh. And I think in the instance of Chico Eats, yeah, he had basically visited every outlet at the Rock, and I know it was very, very popular. I mean, people would follow him around as he was walking through pregame to go to whatever spot, and they'd be yelling at him. He'd have pictures taken, and it was a lot of fun. And it was a great promo for Prudential Center because it opened people's eyes to what was available and made it more warm and engaging and a friendly place for those who were coming there. So it was good on both ends. It was good for Chico because it boosted his profile a little bit more. It was great for the arena, and it was terrific for the viewers because they really enjoyed it. It resonated with them.
Hey, maybe one day Hockey at the Hall could be an intermission segment. We'll see.
There you go. You never know. Dream big, right?
But if you want, Matt, we can maybe start getting into the Devils games that have gone on the past couple of days, and the Devils have been playing very well, Sean. Despite that setback to Minnesota a couple weeks back, they've really rebounded nicely, and including their latest win against the New York Rangers.
Thank God, too. It was a rough first couple weeks. A lot of Devils fans were ready to throw in the towel on this whole season, but over the course of the last 2 weeks or so, the Devils have been picking up some wins. Brodeur had the back-to-back shutouts, and then especially the 2 wins against the Rangers. Very, very big. The first one was kind of easy. I don't want to say easy, but it wasn't. We didn't have to grind it out as much as this most recent game against the Rangers, which was the 3-2 win. The late goal by Dinas Zubris got the win. Ryan Carter chipping in his first 2 goals of the season. So all around a great effort from the Devils, who were heavily outplayed at times during that game.
And Matt, you were there, so what were your impressions of the Devils-Ranger game?
Well, similar to what Sean said, the start, the worst in franchise history, certainly put the Devils behind the 8 ball, and they're still trying to kind of move out from behind it. But recently things have turned the right way. And I certainly understand the fans' perspective. I am one myself, but one of the things that being in the business as long as I have has done is kind of softened that edge a little bit. Which doesn't mean I don't want them to succeed. It's just that I can take a bigger picture. I've seen what has happened. I mean, if you go back to 2 seasons ago when they went to the Stanley Cup Finals, that season didn't start out particularly well. It took a while for them to find their form under first-year head coach Pete DeBoer. So while I respect and understand while fans ride a very big roller coaster, beat the Rangers, we're at the top, things are great, lose an upcoming game, and oh my God, the world's coming to an end, or we've slipped, behind somebody in the division or in the conference. So I get that, but I was able to look at it and say, yeah, there are some issues here. There's no doubt. Mm-hmm. They're not scoring a lot of goals, but I thought the pieces were there, particularly in goal, that eventually things would come around. And once you can start stopping goals, and that was never really a big problem even in the beginning, but once you can get settled there and you gain some confidence, I just had a feeling that things would start to work a little better for the Devils. I didn't think it would be a season-long problem, and fortunately it has not been. Not out of the woods yet. They are still thin offensively. Scoring goals, I think, is going to be a bit of an issue all year long, but I think they can score enough combined with pretty good defense core and very good goaltending that they should be in the playoff mix.
And hey, now they're getting goals from Cam Jansen. who would have known that Jansen would have picked up 2 goals in 3 games? Matt, I was at the post-game show with not only Ken Danico but also Chico, and when they were going over the highlights, Ken Danico used the phrase, Cam Jansen, a red-hot scorer. I honestly never thought I would hear that phrase.
No, certainly not. And it kind of shows the genius of Lou Lamoriello, right? I mean, first off, he's in the Hall of Fame for a reason. His success on all levels in hockey has just been well documented and is phenomenal. And I don't think I'm alone when I say that I scratched my head. I think a lot of people did when here are the Devils coming off back-to-back games in which they've been shut out. Lose to Philadelphia at home, lose to Minnesota on the road. They need goal scoring. Travis Zajac is out with an ankle injury. Patrick Eliash is sidelined with back spasms. Two of their veteran players, two of their goal scorers are out of the lineup for a team that doesn't have a lot of depth offensively. And you need goals, and you say, we're bringing up a guy who is more known for his energy and his fights, and he's not going to play a lot of time. Isn't there someone down on the farm that they can bring up that would inject a little offense? And there are guys there. But when you think about it, where would they have played? Would they have knocked out a Dinah Zubris or an Adam Henrique? No, so they probably would have played fourth-line minutes, which is not that much anyway. So how much can you get from them in limited ice time if they need more time to score? So you know what? Maybe that is the right move. Bring in a guy who will give you that energy. The goal scoring has been a plus. So again, it goes back to Lou Lamoriello, the genius. When you think, wow, that's a strange move, there's a method to the madness. And the Devils needed that energy. They needed that presence in the dressing room. He's a likable guy. He's a kind of out there personality. Dude, what's going on? We're going to rock tonight. Things like that. And when you're losing, you need somebody to kind of break the atmosphere and clear the shadows away. And that's exactly what he did. The goal scoring, completely unexpected, but welcomed. And it has really helped turn the Devils' fortunes around.
Yeah, that move definitely baffled a lot of people. I was one of the few people, though, that was really in favor of it. When I heard that it had happened, number one, I was excited because Cam Jansen's a fan favorite. You love to see him in the lineup. Number two, the offense wasn't scoring anyway, so, making a move like this, it can't hurt. You can't sink any lower. And third, it was a rivalry game, too. It would have been more baffling if it was a game against, like the Columbus Blue Jackets, But it was against... It was against the Philadelphia Flyers, so even if he hadn't scored, he was throwing hits. He could always be there to defend his teammates, like you said, get some energy going amongst the guys, and, it worked out great.
Well, and the goal that he scored was off a typical Cam Jansen kind of shift. Hard off the bench. He checks. This is the game in Philadelphia, his first game when he got called up.
I believe it was Timonen.
Actually, it was Andre Metsaros. But you're right, a defenseman for the Flyers that he rocks behind the net. He loses his stick, meaning Metsaros. The Devils get the puck. It's played back to the point. Jansen goes right to the slot and tips the puck home. It turns out it goes off of Metsaros' skate also, but you know what? It was a good play. It was a great hockey play. It was an energy play, and it gave the Devils some breathing room because it was only 1-0 at that point, and their confidence still was battered, and they were still struggling. And again, they're not out of the woods yet, but at that moment, if Philly gets a tricky goal and it's 1-1 and the building turns and now the momentum turns, who knows what the outcome of that game would be. But it was the second goal. It gave them a lift. It gave them breathing room. It further deflated Philadelphia, and they go on to win 3-0, and they really haven't looked back since.
Yeah, no doubt it was a huge goal. And the thing I love about Cam the most is how fired up he gets after he scores the goal. He has the greatest goal celebrations I think I've ever seen.
Well, it's something he doesn't get a chance to do all that often, and it is pure exuberance. It's pure joy. Marty Brodeur was kidding him the other day that he's got to work on it a little bit because when he scored his second goal, he just grabbed Jacob Josephson and just squeezed him tight, almost broke his ribs.
I saw a little mini Foligno hop.
Oh, okay.
Right after he scored. I was at the game. I lost my voice from that incident alone. It was just that exciting because actually another fun fact, Matt, there were some fans that said before the Philly game, if Jansen scored, there were tie-dye shirts to the next home game. He did score, so I was among the fans that went there. We met in the first intermission to the digital zone, and then the second period he scored. I was sitting with my friend who also had a tie-dye shirt, and we just went nuts.
Listen, as Sean said, and clearly, Anthony, you feel, he is a fan favorite, and anything he gives, really anything. I mean, the fans love his energy. They love the checks. They love the fights. We know they're diminished now in the National Hockey League. Whether he'll drop the gloves in his stay with the team, who knows? If he stays long enough, probably. But everything he does with enthusiasm, and that certainly makes and has made him and will always make him a fan favorite.
Matt, you mentioned how good the defense has been, not just historically for the Devils, but especially this year. They've really gotten it together recently. Marty Brodeur now, actually, with his 2.08 goals against average, is he's in the top 10 in the league in terms of goalies. And then Corey Schneider's right behind him with a 2.09. So, Brodeur, especially that game against the Rangers, he looked better than he did in the Stanley Cup run 2 years ago.
Doesn't he love playing against the Rangers? It's the Devils' principal rival, and I don't care. It never gets old, even though that, I think, was his 98th game against them.
Yeah.
You look in history, how many goalies have never even played 98 games? They came up, and they were backups for a couple of years, and that was it. They never even got a chance to play a total of 98, and he's played 98 against the Rangers. But he loves it. He tires, like most of the Devils do, of being in the shadows of that original six team and having to go to the local Dunkin' Donuts or to the local supermarket and have people go, the Rangers, Devils stink. And, they hear it constantly. And, they're professionals and they get it and they applaud the rivalry. But you know what? It means a little something extra to the Devils, no doubt about it. And Marty was the difference in the game against the Rangers.
Definitely.
As you said earlier, there were moments when the Rangers had the Devils completely back on their heels. Devils couldn't get the puck out of their zone, and when he had to make the big save, he did. So it was a vintage performance. He had shut out his last two opponents. He wound up extending that shutout streak because the Rangers did not score until the second period. So he now has added to his totals, and it's the second longest shutout streak he has in his career. But the top three going in, that was number 4. Going in, the top 3 were back in the mid to late 90s. So he really has rolled back the clock.
That shutout streak ended at 191 minutes and some odd seconds. And it came over parts of 4 games, too. And that's huge for Brodeur, especially considering that Ottawa game earlier in the year when he gave up a couple really soft goals. But Corey Schneider went down with an injury. Brodeur had to step in, and he played unbelievable for the Devils.
He did. And, Corey, you look at the numbers, right? The goals against are not separated by all that much. I think it's, 1/100th of a goal.
Right.
As you said, 208 for Marty, 209 for Corey. But the record, Marty's got 5 wins. Corey has just the one that shut out against the Rangers last month. So he's run into a little bit of bad luck, too. He will start the game against Los Angeles tomorrow. Yep. And Marty will start against Pittsburgh on Saturday. So hopefully the Devils' good fortune will continue and Corey can play well and he'll pick up a second win.
I mean, and here's what I think. I think that that Schneider hasn't played too many games recently, and it seems like when Marty's been playing, it's when the defense has been solidifying because they had the trouble and all the breakdowns at the very beginning of the season. Jelena gets put in the lineup. Devils look much more solid. So now when Schneider's starting to get more games with this more solid lineup, it seems like he might get some wins very soon.
Yeah, he might. And I think the Devils are playing as confidently as they have all year long, and the goals have started to come a little bit. So I think that will play in his and their favor. Now, L.A. will have something to say about it, and we'll see what transpires on Friday. But the fact of the matter is they are playing a lot better. And you mentioned Eric Jelena, and I know people realize what he has brought to the team. Not unlike Cam Janssen, he brought energy. It's a different kind of energy. It's more of a youthful energy. It's not a physical style necessarily, but it's a confidence, a wanting the puck, a not afraid to shoot the puck. It's a heavy shot. And he injected life into a defense core that needed it. And coincidence or not, since he's been up, Adam Larsson, his partner, has played his best hockey since his rookie year. And suddenly, everyone is moving the puck a little bit more. Andy Green is more involved. Marek Zhidlitsky is more involved. Peter Harold has always kind of been involved. But those other two in particular, much more involved. And it's not just because of Eric Jelena, but again, he has made a big difference in this team.
Going into the Kings game on Friday night, a little bit of good news for the Devils. Patrick Elias and Steven Gianta are both looking to make their return to the lineup, and that's going to be huge, too, because this stretch that the Devils are going on, over the next 5 games, there's 2 games against L.A., and then they're playing the Ducks, who've been doing unbelievably good. They got a game against Pittsburgh, who's always tops in the division, and then San Jose, Thomas Hertl, obviously all the offensive threats that they have. So it's going to be a rough stretch for the Devils, but they're looking to get a lot of their injured players back into the lineup.
Yeah, we saw Patrick today at practice and Steven too. Pete DeBoer allowed afterward that he'll see how they respond in the morning and whether or not they'll be in the lineup. Patrick, certainly, if he's ready, and he indicated that he was. I didn't get a chance to speak with Steven, but I spoke with Patrick, and he indicated, yeah, he's ready to get back in the lineup. Now, it's not really a dilemma per se, but he left on that first line, but that first line now, in his absence, has started to cook a little bit better. Zajac, certainly a better player, centering Yager. And now you've got Zubris, and they kind of bring that heavy game, despite Yager's skills and the numbers he's put up in his career. He can play a very heavy game, hard to knock off the puck. He's a big man. Zajac's a big man. Zuby's a big man. So I don't know what Pete's going to do. He didn't have Patrick on that line today in practice. So that chemistry thing is odd to play with. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if Patrick's not on that top line. He'll work his way back into the lineup. And, Gianta's return, certainly we know what he can do on the fourth line. So the Devils are more balanced than they were at the beginning of the year. It's funny, just a little change, too. Rostislav Olesh gets waived, and that moves Steve Bernier up to the third line. And it changes the fourth line a little bit. But, again, he brings a little bit more of what they wanted from Olesh. And, again, just it's funny, little changes, but they all have added up to this being a more balanced team, a four-line team that can really go at you, and I think that's reflected in the Devils' better play lately.
Now, if Gianta comes back in, who do you think is the first one to go out? Would it be Josephson? Would it be Cam Jansen?
Yeah, no, at this point it looks like it'll be Josephson. He and Matthias Tenby skated not alone, but they wore the same jersey. There was not a third guy wearing that, I think it was a green jersey, that they wore today in practice. So it would look like that it would be Jacob Josephson who would be the scratch, and Tenby would come out for Elias.
And so we'll see what the final lineups will be by the time they face the LA Kings on Friday. And then backing out of New Jersey, just looking at the Metropolitan Division, Matt, it seemed like all the teams were struggling, the Devils, the Rangers, the Flyers, and right now it looks like those teams are all coming back. The Islanders bounced back with their losing streak with the win against Nashville, 3-1. So everybody predicted the Metropolitan Division to be on top, and it looks like it's slowly returning to that form.
Yeah, a long way to go. I think, the Devils haven't played 20 games, so let's see. Let's see what 20, 25, 30 games brings. But you're right, Philadelphia started to play a little better. I guess they've won their last three, and they come off the win last night against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has struggled lately. I'm still not sure where the Metropolitan Division is. I think the Eastern Conference overall is hard to figure out because there's not really a dominant team. Tampa Bay with Steven Stamkos' injury, I think, will be affected. I'm still not sure that they were the best team in the conference anyway, but their record showed that. Boston there, Toronto, saw them the other day. Yeah, they're a nice little team, but nothing spectacular. There's a lot of balance in the East. The West has teams that are just dominant. You referenced Sean Anaheim coming up on the Devils' schedule, and, of course, games against L.A. here in the next 2 weeks for the Devils, and San Jose. And, L.A., somebody said to me the other day, boy, L.A. is struggling just a little bit. And they had lost that night to Buffalo at the start of their trip. And I said, yeah, they're 11-6-1. Like 23 points is not bad. It would put them near the top of the East. But they were out of a playoff spot out West because it's been so good. The West has dominated the East. Getting back to the Metropolitan Division, I think things are starting to shake out a little bit. Rangers have put their bad start behind them, and that long road trip Philadelphia is starting to. I still don't think they'll get too far. They have too many problems defensively in my mind. Devils, again, if they can get the scoring, they'll be okay. I don't know how in the end it'll work out. Pittsburgh's clearly the class. After that, in the Metropolitan Division, I think it's really anybody's game. Could be the Rangers, could be Washington. Devils get on a run. It could be them finishing behind Pittsburgh, but I think Pittsburgh is the class of the division.
And that's where the Devils got a little bit lucky so far this season. Obviously, with their slow start, they could be at the bottom of the division, especially with how much the division's been hyped up the past couple years. But kind of everybody's been off to average starts. The Devils won a couple games in a row now, and all of a sudden we're only 5 points out of first place. I know it's still early in the season, but like you said, if they go on a good run, especially they're playing Pittsburgh soon, pick up a win against Pittsburgh, then we could be looking at tops in the division.
It's a possibility, and I think that while it is early, and Sherry Ross and I talk about it on our broadcast, because the Devils were so far out of it and so close to the bottom in the East that you had to kind of give some hope. Yeah, it's a long season. Don't worry about it. I think the team can, dig its way out and move forward. But you don't want to lose sight of the playoff spot, because what we have seen in the last several years with the 3-point games, it's very hard to make up points once you get to January into February. If you look at things over the last several years, there's been very little change. There might be a move within the top 8. A team that's 8th might go to 6th. The team that's 4th might have gone to 5th. But once you get to like January, those 8 teams, there's very little change in them. Maybe one team drops out and another team moves in. So you got to get your points. You can't make the playoffs in October or November, but you can lose the playoffs in October and November if you don't pick up enough points. So the Devils weren't really in danger of that. Yes, there are a lot of games, but boy, you got to scramble and grab those points everywhere and every time you can.
And losing out the playoffs early in the season, that's what Buffalo Sabres are looking at right now. Their record 4-15-1. They're not doing good whatsoever, and a major shakeup now in Buffalo. Who was it that they
Darcy
brought in?
Regier.
Darcy Regier got fired as their general manager, and Ron Ralston got let go as their coach. And they didn't bring in a GM per se. Pat LaFontaine, a former Sabre and a great player, he was named the head of hockey operations. And he said that he didn't think he had the experience to be a GM, but he knows people and that he will reach out and come up with a candidate or two, and they'll pick someone from that. It may, in fact, be his choice, that they'll have a GM in place shortly. And then Ted Nolan has come back into the National Hockey League and back with the Buffalo Sabres. He's being called an interim coach because, in general, the GM gets to choose his coach, especially when you shake things up the way Buffalo has. But it may be a part of the deal, too. Pat may speak to whomever they're thinking about hiring, saying, listen, we want to keep Ted. Ted's a very good coach. He has a great track record in the league. It's been a while since he's been in the National Hockey League, but he will get that locker room going again. So I wouldn't be surprised if Buffalo gets a little bit of juice and a little bit of a jump off of Ted coming in because, again, not unlike Cam Jansen or an Eric Jelinek coming, when you're losing, you need some energy. And where do you get it? Not from the group that's been losing. So it comes from the outside. So Ted Nolan brings a new voice, a new message, a new sense of hope. And I think the team will respond a little bit to it. Overall, they have a lot of issues. I don't think they're that good, but they should get a little bit of a bump soon.
And Sean, I guess you kind of said the secret word with the general managers and Darcy Regier. And I believe a couple days ago, Matt, there was a general managers meeting across the league on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, and a couple of the rule changes were being discussed with hybrid icing, the overtime format, and possibility with fighting.
Yeah, and they wanted to address, I guess, in light of the goalie fight in Philadelphia when the Flyers lost 7-0 to Washington and Ray Emery went down the ice and fought Braden Holtby. And while there were some who, and maybe more than some, who were outraged by it, and it didn't look good, Holtby barely could defend himself. And, Emery targeted him specifically, of course, goalie to goalie, but it was just it didn't need to happen. And people were outraged by it. Me, I thought it was fun. Hey, what the heck? You don't see goalie fights all that often, and I get the energy and I get the edge when you're getting killed at home. And Emery decided that he had had enough, and there were some other scrums happening, so off they go. But I'm glad the GMs didn't address that. There were some who said, if you go past center ice, and you're a goalie, you get suspended. Come on. It doesn't happen all that often.
It's one thing if
it's fun. It's part of hockey's core and part of its history and heritage. It's not a gong show, but they do happen, so let it go.
I mean, my only beef with that fight was that it's one thing if it's consensual or mutual, if Holtby agreed to drop it too, but he really wanted no part of it. So
No.
I think that's the only reason why I find that there's a lot of outrage about that. Had Holtby come up with him at center ice and they both agreed to go, then yes, it would have been fine.
Well, fighting is an ongoing controversy in hockey, which it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be a controversy. It's part of the game. It's always been part of the game. Bettman said that they're constantly monitoring the game. The game doesn't need Bettman to be monitoring it. The game is fine without Bettman. I think it'd be better without Bettman. But they were talking about there was a sit down with Emery and Gary Bettman to talk about the incident, and Bettman had said something along the lines of, they were thinking about the 10-game suspension for crossing center ice, and Emery literally asked Bettman if he was crazy.
Well, listen, I can understand that Ray would have been upset if that edict had been handed down. Now, who is it going to affect? I mean, how many goalie fights do you see? So I don't think that all of a sudden, if the GMs had decided that they wanted to pursue a change in the rules and it was approved by the Board of Governors, that suddenly there'd be a bunch of goalies who would be like, wow, the game has really changed for us, I just think the league felt it was a black eye and an embarrassment, and they're looking to expand their audience. And when you have the reaction that you do among media members that don't normally cover the game, and their reaction is, look what happened at a hockey game last night. Isn't this terrible? Look at this poor defensive goalie getting beaten up by the other goalie. And so the connotation is, this is bad. This is a bad sport. This is not what you want. So you're always looking for positive publicity, although some would say that any publicity is good. So I kind of get where the league leaders are coming from. But in the end, it's a rare occurrence, and I think, the GMs made the right move when they said, we're not going to revisit this issue. It doesn't happen all that often for us to spend any time on it. As for the other things, overtime, I think there are some, even though the fans love it, I think there are some who don't like the idea that a shootout decides the game. Fans are always on their feet during the shootout, but maybe time has run its course a little bit. There's been some talk over the years from GMs, particularly Ken Holland in Detroit, that he would want to alter the overtime format. It's currently 5 minutes of 4-on-4 skating. He has suggested that after a certain period of time, you go to 3-on-3. In all likelihood, the more ice you create, the better the opportunity to score, and you end the game. Even though 3-on-3 is not hockey-like, it's normally 5-on-5, but it is on the ice. It's not a skills competition. Do you extend the overtime a little bit to give more time to determine a winner? So they're going to review that and talk more about that in March, and that's a good thing.
The one problem about 3-on-3, what if somebody gets a penalty? Do you have just two skaters on the ice?
Yeah, well, I think that's what they want to take a look at all of the issues. And here's the other thing, right? Coaches are hired based on their ability or the belief that they can get a team to win. And they are fired when it doesn't happen. And as people have said many times, the coach knows when he's hired. He knows he's going to get fired. There's no date on that contract, right? So coaches are going to look at how they can preserve their jobs. And the way they preserve their jobs is by maybe getting the game extended into a shootout where they have a chance to pick up that extra point. Both teams will get the point in overtime anyway for going to overtime, so it's the extra point being decided in OT or in the shootout. So, yeah, in theory, 3-on-3, more open ice, more opportunities to score, but I guarantee there will be coaches, and there are a lot of bright minds in this game, who will say, rather than trying to exploit it, because maybe our team's not as talented as the other team, and we've kind of fought our way here, and we're just a couple minutes away from a shootout. We've got the point anyway. Who knows? We might get lucky in the shootout and pick up the extra point. So rather than go for the extra point in overtime, despite the fact that it's 3-on-3, there might be a lot of slowing it down, ways to minimize opportunities. Yeah, if they come our way, great, but let's not get caught where it's 3-on-0 the other way or 3-on-1 the other way. So I think coaches, being conservative by nature, will try to find a way around having 3-on-3, not become the rule. The GMs and then the Board of Governors will decide that, but figuring out a way to not make it as up and down as some hope.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the shootout's very exciting.
Except if you're the Devils this year, where they haven't scored even one shootout goal. Never mind to win a game in the shootout. How about score a goal in the shootout?
13 attempts. As Sean brought up before the show, I believe Pete DeBoer said that Marek Zidlicky is now on the table for shootouts.
I think Marek is the only Devil this year. Tom Gallitti of The Record was telling me this earlier today. That Marek's the only Devil who has actually scored in a shootout at some point in his career, who has not yet been used this year by Pete DeBoer. You know what? It is a skill issue, though, and I know the fans rail against Pete at times, saying, "Oh, you're not practicing the shootout enough." And again, love the fans, love the passion. I don't have a job if there aren't fans. I get their frustrations, but really, you can practice all you want. And it'll help a little bit, but if you don't have the hands and the niftiness, you're just not going to be a good shootout shooter. And the Devils don't have a lot of those players. That's just a fact. They have guys who can do certain things, and as a team, I think they can get into the playoffs. But when you talk about naturally gifted goal scorers, guys that just make a goalie fear seeing him come down the ice. They don't have the Patrick Kanes. They don't have the Zach Parisis. They don't have the, Alex Ovechkins anymore. They have good hard workers that can beat you in the corners, outwork you. But when it comes to a skills competition, the Devils are not loaded with a lot of those guys. So it's kind of the hand they're dealt.
I mean, I think
one goal. Somebody could score a goal, even by luck.
One thing though about the shootout, though, is that sometimes the star players aren't really the answers. I mean, Jussi Jokinen, I believe he started out his career 9 for 9. And, even though the Devils do play a forechecking style, I do notice a lot of finesse in picking the pucks out of the boards and between the players' legs. And one player who I think has good hands that has not gotten an attempt yet is Andrei Lakhdionov. I've even advocated for Stephen Bernier to getting a shootout try.
Yeah, or like a Matthias Teddenby who's got great speed. Look, I mean, these guys aren't lugheads, or these guys aren't. I mean, they're in the National Hockey League, so they have skill level, a skill level certainly, but even like a Jokinen, he's not a star, but his individual skills, his hands are pretty good. Why he's not become a star? Circumstance in some cases, work ethic in the other, who he's playing with. I think there are some factors why guys have great individual skills, but it doesn't reflect at the end of the year in their being among the top scorers in the league. But I think if you look at most great shootout guys, they're pretty dynamic guys. So we'll see. I think and some players don't like it. Some players don't want the pressure. We think these are all, and they are all, A-type personalities at the top of the pyramid. They've separated themselves from the pack. But within that group, there is still an elite, and there's still a sense of, do I belong here, and how good is my skill? And there are some guys who just don't want to be out there.
Well, the shootout is essentially a skills competition, like you said. That's why some people are against it. That's why I'm against it, because it really has nothing to do with the game. And especially being a goalie, too. I've been in plenty of games where, you work hard the entire game, you play a great game, and then you can lose it in, 2 shots coming down the ice. So, getting back to the overtime, they might extend overtime. I like the idea of just making it a 10-minute 4-on-4 overtime. Getting down to the 3-on-3 is kind of gimmicky, too, because how often do you see a 3-on-3 situation in the course of a regular game? So I like the 10-minute idea, 4-on-4 the whole time, and then if nobody scores there, just end the game in a tie.
Yeah, and I know this is a bit old school and it's never going to happen, but what's wrong with a 60-minute tie? I mean, before they introduced overtime, I was covering the game, and overtime certainly added an interesting element to get that extra point, but a good road tie is something that was important to teams. Like, here we are, we're a little undermanned, we're on the road, we don't get the last change, etc. And we've been able to battle a team to a tie. We stole a point. We came out of here with the point. So they go to the, they decide that they didn't like that. They preserve you keeping the point, but they wanted a winner. North America wants winners. That was the thought. I think there have been incredibly exciting, hard-fought ties, but again, I don't think we'll ever go back to that. I think the whole notion of having a winner is here to stay.
I think ties are a balance between for the pure hockey fans, like the three of us, whereas with the casual fans, I'm sure they would more likely want to see a winner out of it. So I think that's the big problem. If the NHL wants to expand to the more casual fans and try to expand its viewer base, then they'd be better off just sticking to a winner-loser kind of situation.
Well, and that was the marketing research that they had done and decided that, again, in North America, people love winners. However, the most popular game in the world is soccer, and they play, with the exception of championship games and World Cup games, things like that, they play to ties. That's part of it. So I'm not so sure that you couldn't expand the reaches of the game within the continent by maintaining ties, but they're not putting the genie back in the bottle there. So they will adjust. I'm sure there will be some adjustment in the overtime to avoid some of the shootouts.
And one other idea that I heard was Lou Lamoriello. Of course, thinking outside the box, a genius that he is, comes up with a really creative idea. He said maybe teams could switch sides again in the overtime. That way they have a longer change, more odd man rushes, more offense, and a bigger chance for the game to end in overtime.
Yeah, Lou is always thinking, and that long change that you refer to doesn't have a big impact, but there is an impact, and only something small like that could mean a big difference. So yeah, it's a little bit more hockey-like where you do that. I still think you could play 20-minute overtimes, which of course you can't because the players are exhausted and it's the regular season. It's not the playoffs. You could play 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes. You could go 4-on-4, 3-on-3. Coaches are going to devise a way to try to get it. Again, it protects their best interest. They going for it. Safe is death, is what John Tortorella used to like to say. But safe does preserve your job, because if you are too attracted to the light as the moth, you die. You know what I mean? Like, it sounds great. Let's go up and down. Let's take chances. But then if they come back and bite you in the butt because you've given up goals, then GMs start to wonder, are you the guy behind the bench? So I think coaches are just conservative by nature, as I said. No matter what they do to change it, they'll try to figure out a way to keep it just the way it is, nice and safe.
And one last thing about the general managers meeting. This has been implemented this year, hybrid icing. Sean, I know you're against it. Matt, what are your thoughts on it?
I don't like it. Go back to the same thing with the goalie fight. And the Devils had a player a few years ago. He played briefly for them, Curtis Foster, who suffered a horrific injury on an icing, a race to get to the loose puck, and he suffered a broken leg. They are rare.
As did the only other one I can think of, Taylor Faden. I think he played for the Oilers. He also had a similar injury.
The injuries do occur, but they're rare. And in this world, you can't protect everyone from everything. I like the idea of racing after the puck. There weren't that many icings that were canceled anyway, but it's a competition. It's me against you, and there should always be that edge. The hybrid thing, I don't like it. It doesn't look like hockey to me. I may get used to it, but
it puts too much of an emphasis on the ref. It's another judgment call, which the refs already mess up the black and white calls enough as it is. So I think leave the judgment calls out of it. Either make it a straight no-touch icing or touch icing.
Yeah, and I don't think they want to go to like the college rule where it's it's not the hybrid, it's the automatic.
Yeah.
I don't like that either. The hybrid, I've seen a couple of races where guys have been able to cancel an icing. That's kind of been exciting, and that's more what I like, that competition. I just think, that they missed a few on the regular icings too, whose stick touched the puck first, etc. But they didn't miss many, and I don't think they'll miss many here. You're right, it's another judgment call. I just don't like the way it looks.
Well, I do public address for the Seton Hall club team, and they college does have hybrid icing at a much slower pace. It looks reasonable. However, at the NHL, with the fast pace that it is, it looks a little sloppy. And there was also a rule that Sean and I have been talking about where if you do hit somebody to the boards on an icing call before they adopted hybrid icing, it would be a penalty. And that alone seemed like the pretty good deterrent because that was after both Foster and Faden had the injuries. So it seemed like they have already kind of deterred the icing collisions.
Yeah, and I thought it was a rule that was implemented to address a problem that I really didn't think existed. Now, Curtis Foster was very much an ardent supporter of a change, and obviously he would be. He was significantly affected. But most of the players I talked to and talked to think there was no problem with the way it was, and they're not overly excited about the way it is.
Here's my whole thing with the hybrid icing. Now, what the hybrid icing does is if there's a race for the puck and the offensive player has even just a little step on the defensive player, that's when they let it go, right? But that's still going to be both players going crashing into the boards to touch the puck. So, the only time that they're blowing the whistle early is when there's not going to be a collision anyway. So, like you said, it addresses a problem that really doesn't exist because there's not that many injuries in the first place. It doesn't really change the collisions from happening. So, And there was a perfect example. I don't know if you remember this play from the Devil Ranger game where the puck was dumped down the right wing boards.
Mm-hmm.
And the Devil player was leading the race, and the puck wrapped around the boards, and on the other side, the Ranger player was leading the puck for the race. It was Ryan Callahan.
Right. Yep.
But they blew it down early because the guy on the right wing side, they weren't even paying attention to Ryan Callahan, who was going to touch the puck first.
Yeah, I do remember that, and I do remember the crowd not liking it, understandably so. Again, it's not going to make it perfect, so I'm not sure why it changed. There's still going to be mistakes made. It's a game officiated by humans. They'll miss things, so you don't eliminate the imperfections, and you eliminate just a very small amount of injuries. To me, it's not hockey.
All right, and wrapping up with that GM meeting, our next topic is the Olympics coming up in Sochi.
Mm-hmm.
And as Sean and I were discussing with the broken leg, Steven Stamkos may miss the Olympics, which will affect the team, I believe, Team Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge blow to Canada if Stamkos isn't back in time. Obviously, probably the best natural goal scorer in the National Hockey League. So, you root for him to come back. And, you don't really want to say this, but it's going to help USA if he doesn't come back. But at the same time, you're not rooting for him to stay injured and miss the Olympics.
No, you never want to see an injury. And Canada is so deep in talent. He's great. He is a natural goal scorer. So Canada will feel his absence, but they can replace him more than, some other teams. Because of the depth of the roster. And, you don't want to see any injury. I feel bad for the game, actually. I mean, I certainly feel bad for Stamkos himself. He's a genuinely nice guy who gets it. He's a hard worker. He understands his place in the game. He understands what he's been handed. He gets it all. He certainly likes the spotlight, and he likes the money and all the things that come with it, the ability to get a front row seat at a concert. But he understands that there's a responsibility that comes with all of that. And he is unfailingly polite, and he has blended in well with some veterans down there, and yet he is one of their big stars. So I feel sorry for him. I do feel sorry for Tampa because they just lose a great player. But I also feel bad for the game. I mean, you want to see these young guys. I mean, the league is exciting. It's fast. It's up and down. It's growing. And, and Stamkos is a group of very young players that are pushing this game forward. So it's a loss all the way around, no doubt.
And so, Matt, just one more question about the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
Just overall, do you think the pros should participate in the Olympics, or do you think it should be left for the college and amateur players?
Well, I think that if it's open to the college and amateur ranks, maybe if you were to let some minor league players in, put some limit on how many games they might have played in the NHL, it would be wonderful for them. I don't think there'd nearly be the interest in it. I don't know that the Olympic participation by the NHL is going to last much longer. There is a problem. It does shut down your business for over 2 weeks in the heart of the best part of the season. The playoffs are on the horizon, especially for teams like the Devils, where you're trying to make your way through this very clouded and crowded landscape of sports in the New York, New Jersey area. So now you get out of the football season. Baseball hasn't started. The playoffs are coming up, and you can really get support from your fans. And now you're shutting things down. It does not make any sense. I don't think there's a hockey fan alive who thought that the gold medal game in Vancouver was a bad one. I mean, you're on the edge of your seat. But did Switzerland playing Sweden sell another ticket in North America? I don't know that it did. So I understand why the owners – I love the action. I love the best playing the best. Don't get me wrong. But I understand why the owners are opposed to it. I also understand why the players want to go. They want to represent their countries. They love the fact that they can wear their country's sweater in an international competition as big as the Olympics. So there is that dynamic. It only affects a few players, though. The overwhelming majority of the league goes on vacation. talking about players now. So it's only a handful of players who get that opportunity anyway. So there are competing and conflicting interests here. The league has pushed, Gary Bettman, the commissioner, talked about it recently, and there'll be more conversation. Lou Lamoriello is of the belief that the World Cup will return, and it will be a regular part of the hockey landscape. It will be before the season starts, held in September, so that as training camps start, it kind of builds interest in the sport, and that NHL participation in the Olympics ultimately will fade away. But the players like it, and the NHLPA won't sign off so easily. But I think if it's presented properly, the World Cup might be what we see on a regular basis, replacing NHL participation in the Olympics.
The Olympics are a competition of the best athletes in the world, which is why I think that NHL players should 100% be allowed to go play in the Olympics. Obviously the World Cup is definitely an awesome event, but at the same time, it's extremely disappointing to know that after Sochi, there's probably not going to be participation in the Olympics from NHL players. And that's got to be heartbreaking for the players, too. I don't know if this is maybe an option, but, maybe the players can all come together and just go play the Olympics anyway.
That's what the threat was made, particularly with Sochi here. There was this thought that if the NHL did not come to an agreement with the International Ice Hockey Federation, that players like Alex Ovechkin would say, I'm going anyway. These Olympics are in my home country of Russia, and I'm going. And then what do you do? If you have this mutiny, you could say, well, we're going to not pay you. Great. We could say we're going to suspend you, but that certainly would affect you if you're the Washington Caps. So there was that fear. What happens if we have this situation occur? So I think it'll have to be negotiated. I think that the league may not have an easy fight on its hands. I agree with you. I think the players definitely want to go. But I think also the league struggles with the fact that their game shuts down. They don't really get any money from the Olympics. And you know what? Money talks and the rest walk. So maybe if the IOC said, listen, we'll cut you a check for, I don't know, pick a figure, $500 million, and you could distribute it to your 30-member teams, then the NHL might go, hey, not so bad. But the fact of the matter is they don't really see much of an impact on their bottom line. Yet, I don't think there's any argument that, going back to 2010 and what a terrific game it was, it ended, unfortunately, with the U.S. losing in overtime, but the buildup was incredible. And I think, yes, there was the casual fan, not unlike the Super Bowl, who said, I don't really understand hockey that much, but there's USA and Canada, it's the Olympics, I'm going to sit down on my couch and watch the game. And that fan was treated to a dynamic game, and maybe he or she became an NHL fan, decided that, you know what, I like this Sidney Crosby, I like this Zach Parise, Ryan Miller's pretty good in goal, maybe I'll go see a game. So the NHL hasn't been able to directly show where their bottom line is impacted positively. They are able to show that there's a negative to it, and that's why they are opposed to it.
All right, and we're going to go to one more topic before we go to Clancy's Crease. And Sean, I know you are very passionate about this. However, we are nearing an hour, so let's just keep this nice and concise. You guys both get to say the goal song. They finally decided that it was going to be Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes.
Yep.
So, Sean, Matt, really quickly, what are both of your opinions on it?
Well, I'm interested, Sean, what you think as a fan.
As a fan, I'm extremely disappointed that they took the goal song away. Obviously, I understand that the owners come in and they want to create a more family-friendly environment. But come on, it's a hockey game. No matter what you do, there's going to be profanity in the stands. And it's not like when the Devils say you suck in the goal song. There's much worse profanity that goes on during those games. A lot of them, the fan will whistle, and then you know what's said after that.
Yeah, and that to me, that is the more obscene of the two chants. And that one I would like to see go, no question. Look, my opinion of it is this. Absolutely. It's the owner's rink. It's the owner's team. They have the right to implement whatever policy they want. I just don't get, and I'm older than you guys. I come from a different generation. That word, sucks, has a far different meaning to me and people who are a little younger than me and certainly older than me than it does to you guys or to my children. But I just don't like it. Okay, I just don't like the word because of what it meant when I was growing up, and I don't use it. I get that English as a language evolves. We don't say thou or thee anymore. And that word really has basically come to be maybe a little more strongly edged, you stink. Right?
Yeah.
I kind of get it. On the other hand, I don't get why it has to be sung during a celebration. I've been in enough rinks around the continent where the fans are celebrating their team scoring a goal, which is not to suggest that the Devils fans aren't. They clearly are, and they love it. I mean, it'd be silly if you didn't, if you were somehow disappointed your own team scored. So why does that I just don't know why that term has to be included in the celebration. Why it can't be just a joyful moment. We've extended our lead. We've tied it up, whatever the case may be, and here we are. So I'm not a fan of the term, and I understand some fans, obviously you're one of them, disappointed that the song changed. But I think it has, and it has changed for good. They're not going back. And let's move on to something important, like the Devils winning more games or, getting back to the Stanley Cup Finals.
You see that, Sean? I was telling you it's not coming back. Now I got the WFAN play-by-play guy for the Devils telling you, so I think that's the nail in the coffin for you.
Well, I don't represent ownership here, but I don't think it's coming back.
Well, what upset me so much about it in the first place was the pregame intro video that's up on the Jumbotron? Mm-hmm. One of the main words, one of the things they talk about on there is the word tradition. And so you see the word tradition, and then, a couple minutes into the opening night game, the Devils score, and then one of our biggest traditions was taken away. So that's partially what upset me the most. And then that fan vote that they did, I think was a little bit... because when you went on the Devils, the Facebook page, mm-hmm. and all the fans that were suggesting possible alternative songs, and then the three that apparently were the highest voted, you never saw these. These were never suggestions that the fans made. So I think the Devils owners just did whatever they wanted. And I think they led us to believe that we had a say in it when we didn't really have that much of a say in it. But the song is what it is now. And no matter what they do, the fans are still going to add "You suck" to it. They've already started doing that.
But it might stop a few from doing it.
Yeah.
Listen, I don't think that ownership, and again, I don't want to get in trouble here with my bosses, and I don't come here to speak for them. But I think what it has done, it has diminished that cheer a little bit. Yeah, absolutely. They are not going to go around and look to see who uses bad language in their eyes and mark them with a big X and prevent them from coming in. I think they just wanted to reduce it, and I think they probably have. It's your right, it's anyone's right to cheer as you want to and say what you want to. But I think that they just wanted to get away from more people got involved. Let me just backtrack a little bit. I think the reason we've seen it not be as loud as in the past is because those who kind of got carried along with it or who didn't think it was that important have decided, all right, whatever, let's move on. Ironically, we didn't score a goal the first night it was supposed to be unveiled. That was against Philadelphia. And then we scored 5 goals against Nashville, and I think that's what people have focused on, and I think that's what ownership is pleased with. You're never going to make it perfect. I don't know if that was their intention. Maybe it was their hope, but I don't think the song is going to change, and I think, Seven Nation Army is here to stay. And I think the tradition they want to focus on is winning Stanley Cup championships.
And all right, so it looks like we'll finally wrap it up, and now we'll move on to the one mainstay, as we discussed before, Matt. We're going to take a backseat now to Sean Clancy. He is the goaltender of this show, so we're going to go on to Clancy's Crease. So, Sean, what do you have in the world of goaltending?
Well, the big goaltending news is the Edmonton Oilers, obviously struggling in all kinds of different ways this season. They've signed Ilya Bryzgalov. So Bryzgalov's back in the NHL now. The Oilers this season have had 3 different goalies play for them. Obviously, Devin Dubnyk's been the starter. His goals against average is a 3.69, and there's Jason LaBarbera and Richard Bachman, who are also both north of a 3 goals against average. The save percentages are all subpar, so it's not been good. Nothing's been good for the Oilers. So they're bringing in Ilya Bryzgalov to see what he can do, and everybody's making jokes about this already. I really don't get it, though. Ilya Bryzgalov's a good goalie, if you ask me. He played those great years with the Phoenix Coyotes when he was a Vezina candidate, and then he came over to Philadelphia Flyers, and his first year with the Flyers wasn't bad at all. He had a record of 33-16. His goals against average was a 2.48. That's not bad. Last year, not as good of a year, but every goalie for the past how many ever years has struggled with the Flyers. It's not the goaltender's fault so much as, maybe the Flyers system, their defense. So Ilya Bryzgalov, I think he's a good goalie. How much he's going to help the Edmonton Oilers, I don't know if he's really going to make that much of a difference because they got a lot of problems going on right now. But you never know. It's similar to the Florida Panthers bringing in Tim Thomas. He's another great goalie. There's not much he could do to help the team out, but it's a start. It helps. So good for Bryzgalov. And you remember, Anthony, when I said that I was pretty disappointed to see that Ilya Bryzgalov was kind of on his way out of the NHL. So I was very pleased to see this news that he's back. So I wish him the best of luck with the Edmonton Oilers. That's all I got for you, Anthony.
And so, Matt, would you like to maybe say what you think about Ilya Bryzgalov and what do you think about him coming back?
Yeah, I think he certainly is an NHL caliber goalie. He kind of, I think, got caught up in his own quotes a little bit in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
They loved him in the beginning, and then when the wins didn't come, they hated him, but he wasn't going to change. He's a little bit of a different bird. There's no doubt about it. But goal scoring right now, I think they've been shut out in their last 3 home games. They got shut out last night. So he can't score goals, so he's not going to help them there. They do have some issues, there's no doubt. They had all of those high draft choices, and it hasn't developed into a powerhouse. So it might just be putting a Band-Aid on a big
Shot of
gash.
energy, maybe?
Well,
just like what we were discussing
could
before?
be a shot of energy. And listen, you know what? He's certainly better than the guys he's replacing. So it is a good move for Edmonton. But I think there are other issues, as Sean indicated, and I'm not sure that he solves them all. But he makes them better.
3 out of 4 of their last home games they've been
Okay.
shut out, Matt. And the other one was a overtime loss to the Florida Panthers, so things not going good in Edmonton.
But they did beat the Devils, which
Yeah.
and
That was
the
the
Devils had a
Devils' worst
3-0
game in
So
lead.
with
But-
their young guns, their offense will eventually come back.
It
and
should.
Especially with the Devils game. I was telling Sean in our podcast before that, hey, with these young guns, you have to expect a high-scoring game.
Yeah, I think that in Edmonton, what has probably happened a little bit is that these guys came in with these great clippings, and the sense was it's just going to happen. We're great, and we're highly skilled, we're highly drafted. And once we get together, we're just gonna roll here. And well, it's not quite that simple. And they've had changes behind the bench on a relatively frequent basis, and that hasn't helped. And so I think that word that they use in hockey all the time, accountability, can be overused, but I don't think that there was an atmosphere where the young kids understood, look, this is not junior anymore. This is the National Hockey League. There is a way to approach things. It's not just throwing your sticks out. It's not just skating quickly and trying to avoid someone and make a great highlight move. It's about hard work, and I think that work ethic was missing in Edmonton.
That really was an awful game against Edmonton. And I had completely forgotten about it, Matt.
Well,
and
you're
you
up
brought
3-0.
it up.
You're up
Rehashed
3-0.
all those bad memories.
You're up 3-0, and that's a game at the start of a road trip that you got to put in your hip pocket.
Yeah.
Now, they lost the next night in overtime to Vancouver. Calgary is a team they could have beaten. Things could have been different, but, like they say, if a bus had wings, it'd be a plane. They didn't play well back at the start of the season, and the Devils playing better now, still paying a little bit of that price. But, how much better would things have looked? I even thought about that. How much better would things have looked, even until this recent turnaround, before this recent turnaround, but just before it, if they had just won 1 or 2 more of those games? The record would look dramatically different, and it was possible. It just didn't happen.
Yeah, I've thought about that too. We're 0-4 in the shootout this year. Imagine if we were 2-2 in the shootout. That'd be 2 more points, which would put us up in 3rd place in the division instead of 5th. Say we won all 4 of them, then we'd be 1 point out of 1st place.
Yeah, it's a big difference, and it's only a few points, which goes back to one of the points we made earlier in the show, that you got to grab the points where you can when they're there. And yeah, they've got the points for the shootout losses and the 1 overtime loss, but there were points there for the taking, and it does make a big difference. And teams have lost playoff spots by a point or 2 and hopefully the Devils won't look back at this stretch in the early part of the season where they haven't been able to win after it's gone past regulation and say, what if?
Another thing I noticed, though, despite that loss against Edmonton, I think the team has shown resiliency. Patrick Elias tied it up with less than a minute left when they pulled the goalie.
Yep.
And they showed that same kind of thing when they scored twice in the last minute against the Boston Bruins. So this team, even despite that slow start, or even during the start, they still have that kind of resiliency, that never-say-die attitude, which I think some other teams lack, and the Devils will certainly utilize that mentality going down the stretch.
Dave Maloney, who does the radio for the Rangers, was saying on Tuesday when we were at the Garden that the one thing he's always admired about the Devils, don't forget he's a former Rangers captain, so I mean he's played, he knows the game and has played it at its highest level. Anyway, the point is, he said they always play you hard. That is a Devils tradition. It's a hallmark. Now, there are going to be examples to the contrary. These guys are humans, and not everybody has a good game every night. But you generally know that you're going to have to work hard. You may out-talent the Devils on a given night. You may outwork them on a given night, but you're going to know it at the end of the evening. It's going to be a game where you said, wow, that was not easy. And you'll feel good about your own game. You'll say, like, we played damn well. We came away with the victory. So I think that's one of the reasons, too, earlier in the year when a lot of the fans were calling for Pete DeBoer's head, and the coach is always on the firing line. And Lou Lamoriello has always been one who, if he feels a change needs to be made behind the bench, does it cleanly, surgically, quickly. And it doesn't matter where in the season that move has to be made. He's done it. But I looked at the way the Devils were playing and said, this is not a gong show. This is not pond hockey. They have played structured, sound. They were in virtually every game. And it just were a few breaks here, some tweaks here that need to be made, an upgrade in talent. And there's no question. We talked about some of the guys coming in, whether it's Jelena saying helping there, and even Cam coming up with the energy, finding the right line combinations. All that sort of stuff was just what was missing early on for the Devils. But I thought Pete was doing a terrific job, just with nothing to show for it. I didn't think there was any danger that he would be let go, and the Devils were able to maintain some confidence in their game, like we're just missing. They weren't happy, but they were just missing, and they thought eventually it would turn around.
All right, one last thing now. Matt, what's your prediction for the next game against the LA Kings at home?
Kings will be playing back-to-back games. They'll be without Jonathan Quick. They play the Islanders the night before they come to our joint. They'll be without Jonathan Quick. He's gone back with a groin injury. They are without Jeff Carter. So I think that the Devils, with their newly found confidence in their first meeting since the teams played for the Stanley Cup in 2012, will come away with a victory. I think the team has turned the corner and is on an upswing, and I think they'll come away with a W. But it won't be easy. That's a big, physical, hard team to play against.
I agree with you. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game, because the Devils have a knack of making backup goalies look like all-stars. So I'm calling it 2-1 win for the Devils, maybe 3-1 with an empty net. It'd definitely be a good game, though.
I disagree with you there, Sean, because the backup goalie for Nashville, Hutton, because you have to remember, Bernier is now with the Leafs, so the Kings don't have Bernier. And when the backup goalie came in for Nashville, because Pekka Rinne's injured, Hutton, they put up 5 goals, so you never know. It could always be a low-scoring game looking realistically, but you never have to count out the Devils' offense.
It's possible they'll put up a big number. Daryl Sutter has the philosophy of you play a solid, tight game and you win it by grinding it out. He's got some highly skilled offensive guys, Andrzej Kopitar and Drew Doughty defensively, guys who can wheel the puck. And Kopitar is one of the most underrated players in the league. But I think his goal on the road, third game in whatever it'll be, 4 nights, I guess. He's going to play it very close to the vest. I don't know that there'll be a lot of chances. The Devils will obviously try to take advantage of that, a tired team, but I think in the end, the Devils are going to play their way, the Kings will play their way, and they're very similar, so it might be a little low-scoring game. I think it's going to trend that way. But you never know. It's the best thing about sports, right? You just don't know.
All right, so there you go. Devils-Kings at the Rock Friday night. Tickets are $33 on StubHub, so get out there. Let's fill up the arena.
And it looks like that just about wraps it up. But before we close it out, Matt, I just want to say thank you so much for coming here, taking your time, and having this great podcast show. It has been, without a doubt, the best Hockey at the Hall episode to date.
Well, Anthony and Sean, thanks very much for inviting me. It was a blast. It's always fun to talk the sport, and it's great to do it here at Seton Hall and WSOU with you guys.
And you do a great job at WFAN. I've been listening to snippets of the broadcast, whether I'm in the car, whether we don't have MSG2 here, or MSG Plus 2, so that way I'll be able to listen to you and just keep up the phenomenal work you're doing.
Thank you very much.
And that just about wraps it up for Hockey at the Hall. This has been your host, Anthony DiPaolo.
I'm Sean Clancy.
And I'm Matt Laughlin.
And be sure to tune in next week for our newest episode.